We learnt yesterday about two kinds of messengers. Once the new moon has been declared, once the new month has been declared, there are going to be messages or messengers or signals that go out from Jerusalem to the people of Israel, to the diaspora, to tell them this is the calendar. Because a month can either be 29 or 30 days. The exact time of a lunar month is 29 and a half days. So the months are going to be either 29 or 30 days. And in order for us to celebrate the right festivals, we need to know which is which. So once the new moon is declared, the messengers need to go out from the Bet Din. But in order to declare the new month, the Bet Din needs witnesses. It needs witnesses who've seen the new moon. And we're going to see in these Mishnayot at the end of the first chapter of Rosh Hashanah that these witnesses are going to go to Jerusalem to give evidence, even at the cost of breaking Shabbat. And as we said yesterday, these Mishnayot are codified after the destruction of the temple. So there's no longer any need for the Musaf on Rosh Chodesh to be organized on the right day. And yet somehow, in other words, the temple service is no longer running, and yet somehow the calendar is so important that we are breaking Shabbat in order to get the calendar correct. So the Mishnah we're going to pick up in the 7th Mishnah of the chapter. A father and son who've seen the new moon. Now, the father and son are connected, they're relatives, so ordinarily their evidence would not be accepted together. Witnesses need to be independent. But the Mishnah says, Yehu, they should go. Lo shemitzarfin ze im ze, ela she'im yipasel echad mehem yitztaref hasheni im acher. They're not going because they can join together as witnesses. They're not a pair of witnesses. But if one of them is disqualified, maybe even without one being disqualified, the other can join with another witness. In other words, one of them may be useful in joining with another witness. Rabbi Shimon seems to have a different view about witness eligibility. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Avu v'no v'chol hakrovim ksherin le'edut chodesh. Rabbi Shimon says a father and a son and any relative is eligible to testify to the appearance of the new moon. And halacha doesn't go according to Rabbi Shimon, but, well, we'll see how this plays out, actually. We'll see how this plays out. But Rabbi Shimon has a view that somehow Edut HaChodesh is different. Rabbi Yossi says, Amar Rabbi Yossi, Ma'aseh b'Tuvia harofeh. It once happened that Tobias, the doctor, so people were interesting that people are still really proud of the fact that they have a relative or a friend who's a doctor. Not quite my son, the doctor, but it's that theme is still going through. So Tovia Harofe, Toby the doctor, Shira'ad Chodesh Birushalayim hu v'no ve'avdo mushuchrar. Toby the doctor saw the new moon in Jerusalem with his son and his freed slave. The priests accepted his evidence and that of his son. And they disqualified his slave. This is the first time, by the way, we've heard about the Kohanim, about the priests getting involved in Kiddush HaChodesh. And I don't think we're going to see them again. But clearly there's some tension here, or there's some tradition that we don't understand fully. Because the Mishnah goes on, when they came before the Bet Din, and it's the Bet Din that has to sanctify the new month, not the Kohanim. When they came before the Bet Din, kiblu otov et avdo ufaslu et beno. When they appeared before the court, they accepted his evidence and that of his slave, because a man and his freed slave, they're both independent witnesses. Ufasluet, but no, they disqualified his son because the relatives are not eligible. That's essentially the message of this Mishnah. The relatives are not eligible, even though they can still both go together in case they can match up with some other witness. Who else might be disqualified? Elu hen hapsulin. These are disqualified. These are disqualified from giving evidence. And the first part of this Mishnah is nearly a carbon copy of a Mishnah in Sanhedrin. I think it's in the third chapter. It's either the third or I think it's the second chapter it's the second or third chapter of Sanhedrin anyway. And it's the second or third Mishnah. There's twos and threes here. Elu hen hapsulin. So these are disqualified. And these are all characters with unfortunate financial histories or financial dealings. Hamsachet bakubia, someone who's gambling with dice. Umave verivit, and someone who lends out at interest. Umafriche yonim, someone who races pigeons. Again, this is a bit like playing with dice, actually. People who make their living out of gambling are not considered kosher witnesses, either because they're not considered to be economically reliable, or perhaps because they're not socially useful. It's not quite clear which of these two categories, people who are not socially useful or not financially reliable, is involved. And you'll see, by the way, that these two different categories, social utility and financial stability, run through the categories here. The Mishnah goes on, V'sochrei shvi'it, people who are trading in seventh year produce. Seventh year produce is ownerless. We can go in the field and take it, but we can't trade it. We can't trade it, just as we can't lend out at interest. Va'avadim, and slaves. And I think that the slave is something which I don't think is in the Mishnah in Sanhedrin. Zehaklal, and now the Mishnah continues, and this is absolutely not in the Mishnah in Sanhedrin. Zehaklal, kol edut she'ein ha'isha kshirala, af hein einan kshirim la. Any testimony for which a woman's not qualified, they too are not qualified. So a woman can give evidence, for example, that her husband has died. So her evidence is accepted for certain areas, but not in monetary cases. And the Mishnah is saying, okay, I think these must include the slaves as well as, I think this is just referring to the slaves, actually, that they're not qualified for these types of evidence. What if we need to break Shabbat in order to get to Jerusalem? Someone who's seen the new moon and can't walk. This is, who can't walk to Jerusalem. We bring him on a donkey or even in a litter. So this is on Shabbat, right? We're going to break Shabbat in order to get the witness to Jerusalem. And if they might be attacked, they're going to take sticks. And if the distance is great, they're going to carry provisions with them. So they're going to carry provisions in the public space in order to get them to Jerusalem. Because they can go for as much as a night and a day's journey to profane Shabbat and go out to give evidence for the new moon. And we're going to bring a pasuk. This is a pasuk we're going to be going back to again, and we're going to be going back to again as we learn the next chapter of Rosh Hashanah. These are the festivals of the Lord, which you shall proclaim at their appointed time. Asher tikru'u otam b'mo'adam. the festivals need to be proclaimed. And the Sifra, in interpreting this verse, explains that the festivals only exist because they are proclaimed. In fact, Maimonides in Sefer Mitzvot goes on to explain that somewhere in the land of Israel, there is a Beit Din. Somewhere there is a Beit Din that is proclaiming the new month every single month. And the Rambam explains there that the fact that we are celebrating the right festivals today, that we celebrate Pesach on the right day, we celebrate Rosh Hashanah on the right day, and so on. The fact that we can celebrate the festivals out on the right day is not because we can calculate the calendar. It's not because we look up the date in the calendar. But he explains that it is because of this Bet Din somewhere in the land of Israel that is proclaiming the new months. I hope they're proclaiming them according to the calendar that we have calculated, that we have. But it's because of that Bet Din that we are able to celebrate the festivals on their appointed times. And I guess because Shabbat is the first of the festivals, is included in these festivals, I think that is, the Sifra does not make it clear when it drushes this pasuk, it just gives the drush. But I think the implication is because Shabbat is one of those festivals, we can sacrifice a little bit of Shabbat in order to make the other festivals work correctly.